The city welcomed everyone without distinction. To some, it seemed hospitable and generous. To others, soulless and cold, chasing only profit. But there were also those who, once having visited it, never set foot there again, preferring small towns and dreary villages. When asked about the Dream City, which for most was a bright toy in a gilded wrapper, they either remained silent, looking with pity at the curious simpletons, or tersely responded, branding the city with one stern word: trap. To Rod, who was striving to get to Westwick before the severe cold set in, the city seemed like a vast refuge, promising a well-fed winter and certain opportunities for the future. After 2 years of wandering, the boy was tired of roaming the back streets and alleys of small towns, polished to impossibility. He was sick of the monotonous bridges of quietly fading villages and the dirty markets of tumbleweed fairs. Rod wanted stability in his too young but already lonely life. He wanted to change it, or at least try. What if something worked out? 2 years, 2 circles of hell. He moved towards the cherished Dream City, overcoming obstacles. He hitchhiked, but not often. Not all adults could be trusted. There were times when he was nearly raped, and once he was almost killed while dozing on the street. But these were trifles for a vagabond's life. No one remembered or stood up for the homeless. No one cared about them. All your strength lies in your legs and fists. This is what Rod learned for himself when his life moved beyond the threshold of a home. At 14, he was considered quite an adult by vagrant standards. Once, in his past life, just 2 years ago, he was called by a beautiful and sonorous name, Rodney. But the streets do not tolerate beauty and elegance. They do not need people with names and origins, only facelessness and simplicity. Therefore, very soon, Rodney shortened to Rod, and the fullness of the name now vaguely emerged in the boy's consciousness, not fitting with his current life. Only dreams brought him fragments of that past life, where his parents were alive, where there was warmth and love, and no loneliness. From such dreams, Rod woke up in tears. These visions were worse than the darkest nightmare, tormenting with reminders of the loss of what he no longer had. Westwick met him, its gates wide open. The city had been blanketed with snow the night before, but an unseasonal thaw had set in, spreading a dismal slurry over the metropolis. The snow, which one would have liked to walk on, cheerfully crunching underfoot, quickly melted, mixing with the dirt of the sidewalks and the sand of the roads. The pristine cover turned into millions of puddles, which in turn merged into large muddy pools where the snow slush was trampled by millions of feet. The sky, for some reason, reflected these puddles, impenetrably gray with dirty streaks. It poisoned the already slushy picture with periodic bursts of wet snow devouring the remnants of the former white splendor. "And this new year will pass without snow," thought Rod, looking around, adjusting his dirty, well-worn hat on his head, habitually lingering his fingers on the thick cuff. His mother had knitted it long ago in his past life. His shoes had long since leaked. His socks were wet, but the boy did not despair. Perhaps in Westwick he could find himself a new pair of shoes, and if he was very lucky, even some pants, as his old ones were quite worn out and dotted with holes. Lingering near the towering windows of a well-known clothing brand store, Rod encountered a group of similar vagrant teenagers. Perhaps it was a chance meeting, or maybe he had caught their attention himself. But one of the youths beckoned him over with a finger and started a conversation. "Hey there, newcomer," said a blond boy about Rod's age, his voice almost breaking into adulthood, with a light fuzz showing above his upper lip. "What wind blew you into these parts, you clumsy fool?" Rod did not like anyone's company and diligently avoided encounters with similar groups of peers and older kids. Now he tensed up, resolutely planning to escape at the first convenient moment from these new acquaintances surrounding him on all sides. The kids were dressed almost identically, worn and weathered clothing, some suitable for the season, some not. "Look at this. He's silent," the blond boy continued. "Are you mute or just stupid?" "He doesn't want to say hello to you, Captain," squealed a red-headed boy, younger and shorter. "He doesn't respect you. He doesn't respect us. He's too proud." Rod internally braced himself, ready to receive a portion of shoves or kicks, maybe even slaps. Physical abuse was normal in the world of the streets, a kind of communication and a test of resilience. If you withstood it without flinching or crying like a girl, they would leave you alone, or in the best case, accept you into their group. The first option suited Rod just fine, and he exhaled, preparing to take Westwick's first gift. "Hey, kid, open your eyes," Rod heard. He hadn't noticed he had closed them. The captain, evidently the leader of these boys, stood very close, peering intently into his face. "He's a coward, too." The redhead kid didn't stop. "Hey, are you a coward?" asked the captain. Rod just shook his head no. He had trouble communicating with peers and adults. For some reason, he got along well with little kids and always found the right words in conversations with them. But with peers, it was different. His tongue became clumsy and heavy like a hammer. Something inside him locked up and the words broke on the tip of his tongue. Because of this, he was often considered either dim-witted or arrogant. Every time he couldn't avoid a beating. "Then why are you silent, squinting and turning up your nose like we're some kind of trash? Or maybe you think we are. Well, speak up." The captain's light eyes narrowed menacingly. "He's squinting at us like a girl in the sun." The redhead boy burst out and laughed in a childish voice. "You're like the sun to him, Captain, like the sun." A couple of boys joined in the redhead's laughter, but their leader didn't laugh. His face didn't twitch a bit. "Not funny, Red," the captain said. And the laughter stopped immediately. "He's either scared or acting superior. I don't like either option. Can't stand cowards or arrogant fools. Useless trash. So who are you, clumsy?" "Guys, I just came to the city. I don't know." Rod began to reply, but the blond boy interrupted him. "What don't you know? Didn't they teach you to say hello? Do you know if I want, you'll be out of the city as quickly as you came in?" I didn't mean, I don't know," Rod stammered. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape route among the boys surrounding him. "What are you talking about? Answer properly. Who are you? Where are you from? And what are you doing here?" the captain barked. "I'm Rod, and I came from there." The boy gestured behind him. "Wanted to find a place for the winter, that's all." "Looking for a place, huh?" The captain shifted his gaze from Rod to the other boys. "You're a scared one, Rod. And what's with that strange name?" "It's what I've got. Guys, you know, this kid might not be so bad after all." The captain suddenly smiled and winked at the other boys. "How about we take him into our crew, huh? What do you say?" "He's kind of weird, Captain," the redhead boy squeaked. "Crazy, maybe. What do you think, Bison?" The captain addressed a large, stocky boy with a dark buzz cut and rough, unattractive features. "He's scrawny, Captain Weak," Bison grunted. "I see how it is, Bison," the gang leader smirked. "So, what's your word, Shake? What do you think?" "I think everyone deserves a chance, even a weakling like him," thoughtfully replied a lean boy with coffee-colored skin and expressive girlish eyes. "I agree with you, Shake. You're in, Rod, but on one condition," the captain decreed. "Can I just not join your club and go my own way? Rod unexpectedly blurted out. The prospect of mingling with peers and sticking around with them in the city streets filled him with a mass of unpleasant feelings. He was ready to take a beating sooner than being forced to hang out side by side with these boys. "Loners don't survive in Westwick. Just so you know, newcomer," the captain cut him off. "Don't want to join us? Fine. That was a generous offer from our side. We may be like you, without a home and family, but we have principles, and we don't just throw punches for no reason. Go, we're not keeping you." The boys parted and stepped aside from Rod, giving him freedom. This treatment confused him, and he stood still. He had almost forgotten that people could be merciful and kind. Of course, he had encountered many good and decent people, mostly among the very young or the old. But he considered the former too young and innocent for malice and deceit, and the latter redeeming their sins with good deeds. Rod no longer believed that people could be kind without a reason. Behind every normal act he saw either self-interest or foolishness. "Well, what are you standing there for? Go, no one's holding you," the blond boy with the fuzz above his lip repeated. Something clicked and snapped inside Rod. He feared that click, but for a moment he desperately wanted to become part of this mysterious group, to get something more than a place to sleep and food. He hesitated, but also feared this was the chance he had been waiting for 2 years, for which he had roamed and wandered through miserable villages and dim towns. "Let's go, Captain. This one's a lost cause," the redhead boy squeaked. "He's not cut from our cloth. I'm telling you, he's crazy." "What condition were you talking about?" slipped out of Rod's mouth. "What? You've changed your mind?" The redhead boy was surprised. "Look who's come around. So, are you with us, newcomer?" The captain's eyes narrowed again. "What's the condition?" Rod's voice mixed desperation, panic, and fear. He was simultaneously afraid that it was a trap, but even more scared that the time had passed for something greater, elusive. "One night, newcomer," the captain simply replied. "What does that mean? What's this night?" Rod's nerves were stretched to the limit, and his hat felt small and unpleasantly tight at the temples. "Come with us. I'll explain everything on the way." Rod agreed, suddenly realizing he had no better option. Of course, he could refuse and leave, but doubts would eat at him, and besides, these boys seemed quite different from all the other street kids he had encountered. They had a certain nobility, uncommon for the streets, and there was a sense of organized calm without aggression and unnecessary cruelty. This was what lured him to the obvious choice. The boys walked silently down the street, turning into silent alleys and emerging onto crowded avenues and boulevards of Westwick. They maneuvered like small boats in a lively bay with thousands of tributaries and one noisy exit into the ocean. Rod had never seen such a stark and sharp contrast between neighboring poverty and luxury. So many colorful characters in one place called Westwick, so much dirt and cleanliness. The metropolis left no one indifferent, and Rod was struck by the duality and multifaceted nature of the city. "This is just the candy wrapper," Shaik scoffed, noticing the astonishment on the newcomer's face. "At night, the city becomes real, in a way you'll never see during the day." And they kept walking along the wet tiled sidewalks, cleared of gray snow in the city center, and through the dirty puddles in the back streets. Rod felt like the city was endless, and that they would have to walk forever. But everything has an end. The captain began leading his group further from the center into narrow, dirty streets closer to the outskirts of Westwick. When the boys waded through one particularly narrow and deserted alley, sinking almost to their calves in the gray slush of melting snow, Rod's shoes finally soaked through, half filled with icy water. It was at that moment the captain broke his silent march. "We have a rule. You need to spend a night with the group in a special place. It's a sort of test, a test of resilience, as Red would say. Yeah, that's what I tell everyone, confirmed the red-haired boy. I need to spend the night with you somewhere. What do I have to do? Asked Rod, grimacing at the liquid cold in his feet. What's the catch? First of all, not just anywhere, but in a special place, you fool, the captain continued calmly. And secondly, you don't have to do anything. You just need to be with the group and not go anywhere. And as for the catch, of course there's a catch. A test always implies a catch. That's what makes it a test. And you agreed to it when you decided to come with us. Now you have only one way forward, and don't look back. What if I refuse? If I don't go? Rod stopped, the water immediately beginning to fill the remaining spaces in his shoes. What, you scared, you coward? Your balloon deflated? Red sneered. Bison just snorted disdainfully, and Shike preferred not to look at the newcomer at all. Go ahead. I've already told you. We're not holding you. If you haven't noticed, you're the one holding on to us. The captain continued walking forward, bravely battling the icy slush of the puddles. Rod stood for a moment and then began making his way through the snowy mess again. He was halfway there, and he didn't like leaving things unfinished. His mother had taught him from early childhood to finish what he started no matter what. How many of you are in the group? Rod asked when he caught up with the captain. Now 6. With you it'll be 7. We had 2 more, Joker and Torch. You'll meet Artist and Cowboy at the place, replied the blond boy. What happened to the other 2? You'll find out in due time. We're almost there. In the alleys and on the outskirts of Westwick, the snow surprisingly still lay in flattened drifts, retaining its whiteness. The boys had left the suffocating paved streets behind, leaving behind tall buildings with damp stains on the walls and muddy puddles of snow dirt. Now, feeling invigorated, they walked along a trodden path past an abandoned industrial zone. There were plenty of such places across the country, once bustling with life and people, now frozen in the void of oblivion, seeping through holes in the fences. In such places, one could either meet stray dogs or homeless people, but their path lay further. Skirting the abandoned land along the fence, the group went beyond the city limits. Ahead, there was a highway intersection with an overpass looming above it. That's where we're headed, the captain pointed toward the bridge. We're leaving the city? Rod became worried. No, we'll stop there. You'll understand when we get there. The overpass was equipped with a network of heat pipes, where hot water gurgled. Rod didn't immediately realize that the boys had made their camp right under the road surface, about 30 feet high. At first he thought they were testing him when Red pointed with a smirk to the steps mounted on one of the overpass supports along its entire height. But the captain didn't smile. He was the first to nimbly climb up and disappeared behind a thick pipe wrapped in a good layer of special insulation. Rod climbed second. Once his foot slipped on a rung and he nearly hung in the air, but the animal fear that awakened in him seemed to glue him to the post and helped him successfully climb up after the blond boy. When Rod looked down, his head spun unpleasantly for some reason, even though the height wasn't that great. But the rising sense of helplessness and unaccountable fear pushed him away from the edge, and he preferred to temporarily refrain from looking down, deciding to explore the other life that lurked among the lines of pipes. Up top, it was warm and damp. The hot, vibrating pipes were sometimes covered in condensation, trickling down in thin, steaming streams. There was enough height for the boys to walk bent over among the pipes. An adult or tall person would have had to crawl on all fours. There was a special kind of coziness here. Not homey, of course, but it was still there. The boys had piled up rags in one place. forming a kind of bedding that smelled of their bodies and pipes, which formed makeshift walls. "Are you hungry?" the captain asked Rod. "I am." The newcomer's stomach growled loudly in response, eliciting smirks and grins from the boys. "Here, take this." The gang leader fished a canvas backpack from the rags, rummaged through its voluminous insides, and handed the newcomer an opened pack of cookies and a bottle of water. "It's what we've got." "Thanks." Rod opened the bottle and gulped down a third of it with relish. "I want some too," Shake demanded. Rod handed the bottle of water to the boy and started on the cookies, which had become soggy in the backpack. While he munched on the treat, 2 more boys joined them, whom the captain introduced to the newcomer. "This is Artist." He nodded towards a tall boy with long, dirty hair down to his shoulders. "He paints on all the city walls, sometimes here too. And this is Cowboy." A boy with gray eyes and worn-out jeans and a ridiculous cowboy hat, the apparent source of his nickname, looked at Rod with curiosity. "Have you been living here long?" the newcomer asked. Down below, cars of all sorts hurried in all directions, honking and revving. "Going on the 3rd week now," the captain replied somewhat lazily. "And why here? It's noisy. We're right in the middle of the intersection. How do you sleep?" "When you don't sleep a night, I'll see how this car bustle down there will bother you," Bison grumbled. "What? Does no one sleep at night?" Rod was surprised. "You ask too many questions for a weakling," Red said, spitting heavily. "Well, I'm curious. What's so interesting? Why the hell has life driven us like squirrels onto this damn overpass? Is that what's interesting to you?" Red's voice rose to a falsetto. "That too," Rod replied quietly, bewildered. "Go to hell. Didn't even come here properly and already wants answers to his questions." "Red, stop it right now!" The captain barked, and Red and his hand with the fig jumped to the side. "The newcomer isn't aware of our rules and ways. Don't be hard on him, and don't dare swear. What have I said about this? Forgotten?" "Captain, he got me worked up." Red lamely justified himself, glaring at Rod. "What have I said about this, huh?" The captain's voice thundered. "No one is ever allowed to swear in our community." "Yeah, sorry, Captain." Red shriveled into a ball. "It won't happen again." "You better keep your tongue in check next time you feel like swearing, Red, or I'll count all your teeth and rip your tongue out." "Yes, Captain." Red's voice was completely subdued. "Listen up, everyone," the gang leader addressed the boys. "Don't touch Rod, don't insult him, and certainly don't hit him. If I find out anyone has wronged him secretly, I'll kick them out. Everyone got it?" "Yes, Captain," the boys responded almost in unison. "All right, newcomer, here's the deal." The captain turned to Rod. "Now we all go to sleep, and this is not up for discussion. At night everything will become clear to you, and you'll get all your answers in the morning, if you make it to morning. Now sleep." Rod wanted to ask more, but seeing the gang leader's stern nature, decided to stay quiet. They made a place for him in the common bedding where everyone burrowed headfirst into the brought rags. Rod followed the others' example, wrapping himself under a crumbling old, damp blanket that smelled of mildew, sweat, and dirt. Rod lay for a long time, fearing to fall asleep. After years of wandering, he had gotten out of the habit of trusting people he slept next to. Moreover, this group of boys was very different from all the others he had encountered, which made him even more wary. But the unceasing hum of cars below and the warmth of the pipes, along with his feet warming up after the wet trek through the city, soothed him and plunged him into a sleep without dreams. Rod awoke in the dark. The boys were quietly whispering among themselves in the corner. The boy crawled out from under the old rags and listened to the conversations. "They got too close, Bison," Red's businesslike voice sounded. It seemed he was the second in command after the captain. Joker and Torch. They met them a kilometer from here, and that's a problem. What do you suggest? Should we leave? Bison asked nasally. I would get out of here, Red whispered tightly. More like from fear, Shike interjected in a clear voice. I'm not a coward. Don't call me a coward. There was a scuffle. Tell me you're not afraid of them? That you're glad to meet them? I'm afraid, but I don't run away from them, the dark-skinned boy replied mockingly. If I hadn't run, they would have killed me too. Red protested. You left them, Red, Bison said sadly and gloomily. I wouldn't have left the guys, but I wasn't there. Exactly, Bison. You weren't there, and neither were you, Shike, to talk such nonsense. Red squealed. There were many of them, guys. Hear that many. A whole pack, and there were only 3 of us. What would have been the outcome, huh? 3 against 20. Even if we were all there, they would have finished each of us. We have only one option. Run. Why do you keep saying like a girl, run, run? Maybe you saw shadows and thought there were many? This voice was still unfamiliar to Rod. He guessed it was either cowboy or artist speaking. They must have heard his quiet rustling when he crawled out from under the ragged blanket and fell silent. Tension and a mysterious fear electrified the air, making it heavy and slightly suffocating despite the piercing, frosty wind that skirted the thick pipes. Awake, newcomer? Shake murmured. How long have you been eavesdropping? I wasn't eavesdropping. Rod crawled closer to the boys. What happened? You'll find out soon enough, coward. You'll find out soon enough. The note of mockery returned to Red's voice, but fear emanated from him, a sour smell with a hint of mold that Rod knew too well. I want to know everything now, not later. Tell me, the newcomer firmly demanded. And why are you bossing around here? You're nobody yet to raise your voice, Red snapped, smelling even more of anxiety. Either you tell me everything now, or I leave. Rod decided to take a risk. There was nowhere to go at night, and finding a suitable place to sleep in the dark winter hours was nearly impossible. Besides, he didn't know the city, and the outskirts of Westwick didn't inspire trust without the usual street lighting in the evening. It was pitch dark everywhere, except for the lonely roadside lamps of the intersecting highways. Then get out of here. I didn't like you from the start, Red hissed, acting all high and mighty. And I will, Rod bluffed. Quiet, Red. You're at it again, the captain yelled behind the boys. He had been absent, but returned just in time to prevent a fight from breaking out. What did I tell you? Should I throw you down to them for dinner? Captain. Red's voice trembled and fell silent. He got me worked up. Kept saying he'd leave if we didn't explain everything to him. And we can't say anything without you. You said so yourself. Rod, come closer. It's time to tell you everything, the captain said, ignoring Red's excuses, crawling over the pipe and sitting, leaning his back against its warm surface. The boy obeyed and moved closer, following the gang leader's example, leaning with pleasure against the gurgling hot water pipe. The boys sat in a tight circle around them, passing around a bottle of water and a packet of stale bread and soggy cookies. Not much of a feast, but Rod was satisfied. You seem like a seasoned kid, not your first day on the streets. That's obvious. And you know that people are different, the captain began from afar. In cities, in villages, there are good and bad people. It's good when you immediately figure out a person and see what they are, right? You know how to deal with them right away. But here, Rod, in Westwick, there are different special people. It's even scary to call them people. They're not like others. I don't understand. You'll see them soon. They hunt in packs of 20, sometimes 40. Whoever falls into their hands is doomed. never to see the morning dawn. They're a frightening tribe." "They hunt people?" The boy suddenly felt cold, and a shiver ran down his spine, despite the hot pipe diligently humming behind him. "They catch anyone who lingers on the city streets at night." The captain's voice became hollow and distant, like a sinister ghost hovering over the pipes. "Anyone. They don't disdain bums and prostitutes. They especially love kids and people like us." "And why do they catch people? Just to kill them?" "They hunt them and eat them. I've seen it. Red has seen it," the captain said. "What? They attack people like animals and eat them? That can't be. This is a city." Rod shouted in fear, pinched by the truth. "What, you thought only angels live in the city?" Red snapped back at him. "You have no idea what kind of hell this Westwick is." "Red, shut up!" The captain's stern reprimand cut him off. "Rod, they're worse than ordinary people. Believe me, I've seen it and know what I'm talking about. Once I followed one of them. Didn't regret a day, but followed that bastard. During the day, he hid and kept his beastly nature inside. But at night, coming out into the street, he became like a wild animal." "They're werewolves?" Rod asked uncertainly, bracing for a stream of jokes. "Better if they were werewolves," the captain sighed sadly. "They remain people with reason and memory, but at night they awaken horrific beastly needs to kill and eat. I saw how that guy inhaled the air. He inhaled greedily like a wolf. And I saw his eyes shine with a yellow gleam. How he sneaked through the dark sides of the streets, crouching and almost going on all fours, trying to remain unnoticed. I saw how these creatures dealt with their victims. You can't imagine, Rod. They tore into a living person, biting and ripping chunks of flesh, devouring with clear pleasure and howling. I've never seen anything more terrifying. Is that why your friends aren't with you anymore? Yes. Torch, Joker, and Red were delayed at one food dump. There's always something to scavenge there. It was their turn to bring food to the group. Beyond that zone, the captain pointed into the darkness where the industrial zone lay, which they had bypassed during the day. They were already waiting. These beasts hunt only in packs. They don't go alone. We call them wolves. It fits them perfectly. So they were attacked there. Red got lucky. He was ahead and a bit farther from the guys, so he managed to escape. It's not my fault. What should I have stayed and let those beasts tear me apart too? Red's voice trembled. Rod thought he might cry. I heard Joker screaming, calling for help. They took a long time killing him. Torch didn't even get a chance to squeak. Did they do it with bare hands? The newcomer was horrified. Appetite completely vanished. And what food could one think of when fear filled the stomach, churning the dormant bile? And with their teeth, kid. Red, calm down. The captain tried to console him. No one blames you. Least of all me. It was an ambush. You could have been in the back and switched places with Joker and Torch. But that's fate and providence from above. Let's not dwell on it. Do you understand, newcomer? They are people, but there's nothing human about them. That's why you were talking about moving just now, Rod guessed. Yes. It's not safe here anymore. They've tracked us down or might have followed Red. That was 2 days ago. So all I ask from everyone tonight is to stay silent and lie still. We need to survive this night, no matter what. To spite these wolves. And they will come back, I swear. They will be prowling and sniffing around. Is that why you slept during the day? Rod guessed. Yes. At night we watch from above, and during the day we sleep to last the night. Why don't you leave the city? The newcomer was surprised. Do they live only here? Here or elsewhere. What's the difference? The blond boy replied casually. You know very well what chances you have to make it through the winter in any lousy village or town. But here we have a chance. Here there's enough room and food for everyone. You have no idea how much free, good quality food can be found in the dumps of Westwick. People waste food left and right. We just need to find a new place to sleep, that's all. But you're also food for others. You'll find another place, but you'll still be afraid of the dark and won't sleep at night, watching shadows behind your back. If they attacked you once, they can do it a second and a third time, until they kill everyone. Do you think you'll make it to spring? Better to risk everything and try our luck here than wander the poor streets somewhere else alone? The captain cut him off. That's nonsense. You can live out there too. Rod got agitated, rubbing his hands to warm the frozen tips of his fingers. Then what are you doing here? Why did you come to Westwick if it's so good out there? Red sneered. Yes, brother, you don't look like a lucky one or a favorite of fate, Cowboy chipped in. Rod's eyes had gotten used to the darkness and clearly saw the silhouette of the ridiculous hat. I wanted to see, the boy replied. Just to see? Come on. You didn't just want to see. You wanted a place on the streets of Westwick right away. Sheik unexpectedly joined the conversation. It's written all over your face. Right, artist? Our artist can draw anything you want. Well, artist stammered. You mumble. Bison called him out. You paint well, but you mumble, it's annoying. Should a guy talk like that? Enough. Calm down, everyone. Quiet. The captain whispered harshly to the boys. What are you chattering about? Forgot our agreement? Might as well go down and offer your throats to them. Idiots. The boys fell silent, and a hush fell among the humming pipes. Hey, Rod, the captain quietly called to the boy. Crawl over here. Everything is well visible from here. Just stay quiet. No matter what happens, lie still as if dead. On a small patch of space behind the pipes, closer to the edge, the captain had spread out several old, torn jackets, brought from the communal heap of rags, and lay on one side, leaving room for the newcomer beside him. What about the others? Rod asked. Bison and Red are on the other side keeping watch, and Artist and Cowboy will sleep. They watch during the day. But you said it wasn't dangerous during the day. Danger can arise any time, not just from wolves, and at any moment. Someone in the group must be watching over the rest who sleep during the day, to wake them in time, and at night we guard them, and wake them if necessary. Rod lay on his stomach and felt the protruding lumps of the matted rags beneath him, which he wanted to smooth out to lie more comfortably. Don't fidget, the captain warned him. They might see or hear you. You have no idea how keen their hearing is. How long have you been together? Rod whispered after a minute of silence. He felt uneasy, and the darkness below worried him more and more. Just over a year, not counting Sheik and Artist. They joined us 6 months ago, the captain eventually replied. He was also lying on his stomach, his pale face resting his sharp chin on his crossed arms. Poor Torch. We formed this group together. Did you know him for long? He became my first real friend after I ended up on the streets. You understand what I mean? Of course, Rod replied barely audibly, bracing for an unhappy ending story. I wasn't born on the streets. None of us were. I had a mother and a father, the captain continued. His voice transformed, losing the last traces of childhood, as if a mature man spoke to Rod. And I thought I was the happiest of children? Everyone thinks so, Rod, until a certain point. It's just that for each, Childhood ends at its own time, and all the fairy tale tinsel falls off, becoming dirty garbage. For Red, it happened 4 years ago. He ran away from home from a stepfather sadist who raised him as a guardian after his mother gave her soul to the Creator. And there was no one else to protect the boy from abuse and beatings. Bison never had a family. He grew up in an orphanage, where intolerance and severity bordered on tyranny and heartlessness. He ran away from there a year ago, and we took him into our group. Here he found his first family. The captain fell silent. The newcomer wanted to ask something, but changed his mind. Such conversations did not welcome too many questions. The story would reveal itself. And Shike, that crafty devil, the blond boy suddenly continued. He grew up in a well-to-do family. He had good parents, brothers and sisters. A big family, and he was the youngest in it. How did he end up on the streets? No one is immune to such misfortune. A fire one dark night took away all his well-being and his entire family. By a lucky chance, he woke up needing to use the toilet that night. Someone set the house on fire. People with wealth always have plenty of envious and malicious enemies. Sheik stood outside and watched his house burn and heard his relatives screaming, suffocating in the smoke and dying. Afterward, no one needed him among his kin. They got rid of him and sent him to an orphanage where he met Bison. They escaped together. So much evil from people burst from Rod's lips. As much as there is good, one cannot exist without the other, the captain replied. If a person has known good, they will never forget it. Its smell, its sound, its song, and thoughts. The same goes for evil. There are no entirely evil or entirely good people. There can only be a balance of sides, but never complete singularity. Otherwise, the human essence dies, and instead of a person, there is a robot. Are you making excuses for those who did this to your friends and to you? Rod, in that past life, I had a name. I was called Christian. My father taught me to forgive and understand people, to accept them with their flaws. He was a Buddhist, and passed on his love for all living things to me. After his death, it was hard for me to reconcile the peace and love for the world around me with the rejection of the inexplicable malice that people harbored outside their homes. But I kept my father's teachings and the light of his memory within me. And your mother? You didn't mention her. She left for a better world long ago. I wasn't even 4. The captain exhaled a puff of steam. My father raised me. Why did you give up your name and take a nickname? Rod asked. Torch called me Captain. He thought my real name was too personal for the streets that don't care about you. A name should be kept inside. It's the only speck and the most precious treasure left to a homeless boy. You can take a nickname too. I don't want to. I barely remember my full name. I don't want to forget it completely. I don't want to forget them. Your parents, the captain turned his face towards Rod. I know you lost them, like all of us. They died. Rod felt it necessary to speak out. He had kept it inside for too long and far from everyone. Their car was hit by another one while they were driving home from work. We were supposed to go to the movies together. I was so waiting for them, so desperately waiting. Even when I was told that Mom and Dad had died and I would never see them again. No movies, no birthdays, no breakfasts or dinners together. Nothing. But I waited. I hoped it was a mistake, that they would come back. Any minute the doorbell would ring and I would hear my mom's laughter and my dad's exclamation, "Hey buddy, waiting long? Missed us?" He always said that when he came home from work. But then came the day of the funeral, and it opened my eyes to the terrible truth. And from that day, I was alone. My parents had no relatives to take me in, and I didn't want to be a burden. and the prospect of an orphanage didn't appeal to me at all. I packed my things in a backpack and left home. That's the whole story of Rodney, who became Rod. I'm sorry, kid. We're brothers in misfortune, the captain said softly and suddenly tensed. Wait, I think I see something over there. Rod strained his eyes, piercing the darkness that lay in thick clots below. He didn't immediately notice some movement. Someone was heading towards the intersection. Is it them? He asked the captain. No, this one is walking calmly and alone, the captain replied. But the tension didn't leave his voice and his frozen posture. They always hunt in groups. They never go alone. You know, they even fight among themselves. How so? We realize there are several packs of these wolves, but they don't get along with each other, probably because of territory. Once I saw them fighting. Quite a spectacle, I tell you. Such noise, squeals, growls, and human screams. Not a single word. They're not human. That's for sure. Damn, that's creepy. Rod shuddered. You don't believe? Think this is all a joke on the newcomer? His neighbor snapped at Rod's doubtful tone. You'll see soon enough. They'll come. Then I'll see where your belief goes, newcomer. I'm not saying I don't believe. It's just I trust what I can see or hear, though even eyes can deceive. The lone silhouette slowly approached the intersection. It became clear that it was a male figure, slightly hunched and wrapped in bulky outerwear. Rod hoped everything would turn out fine, that the person would pass by the overpass and continue on one of the 4 roads, bypassing the fatal intersection. But then his attention was drawn to movement a little further away. It was strange and unlike anything the boy had seen before. The movement split and scattered in different directions, but it was clearly heading the same way as the first lone figure, forming a clear semicircle. The boy's breath caught in his throat with excitement when he saw the yellow glows flickering in the darkness, and then realized what they were. It's them? He didn't want an answer to his question. They. The captain's voice was cold and extremely distant. Now stay silent for the sake of all the gods of the world, and tomorrow morning, be quiet so they don't see us. The moonlit lights approached, and now Rod watched in horror as the unclear movements gained contours and features of living beings. Not people, but not animals either. They approached with leaps, using all 4 limbs. If Rod hadn't seen it himself, he would never have believed it. Meanwhile, the lone passerby who initially drew the boy's attention came close enough to the intersection and fell into the light zone of a street lamp, making him quite visible. A young bearded man with a backpack slung over his left shoulder over a thick down jacket didn't seem like a homeless or some other antisocial type, but it was so strange to see him alone at such a late hour in such a gloomy place. For some reason, Rod thought this lone traveler was a brave adventurer or a broken-hearted musician, a seeker of adventures, or perhaps there had been a quarrel at home, and he hastily threw things into a backpack and left. After all, thousands of life paths begin with such hasty and impulsive decisions. The boy wanted to shout to the stranger, to warn him of the danger, but he remained silent. His heart screamed, setting a frantic rhythm for his blood. Rod couldn't betray the boys who had taken him into their albeit temporary, but shelter, shared their bread and water, and slept next to him. It would have been a betrayal, and it would have been equivalent to madness. The man with the backpack was whistling something, perhaps warding off troubling thoughts or scaring away the night and what lurked in it. But he fell silent. He also felt something was wrong behind him because he turned sharply and froze. "Run! Run faster! Don't stand still! You can't stand still!" Rod screamed silently within himself. He was afraid to lift his face from his hands. into which his chin was pressed painfully. His body was filled with lead, and his legs became like cotton. Now he felt like a monolith, a granite block that no one could move. He could only close his eyes tightly and let his ears do the watching, but he couldn't. Desperately, the boy watched as the distance between the prey and its hunters quickly closed. The man finally saw the yellow flicker and those to whom it belonged. Then the following happened. His face contorted in terror. He stood motionless for a moment, paralyzed by fear, but then he bolted towards the intersection. The viscous snow hindered and slowed down his large, abrupt strides. A couple of times he stumbled, once fell. The semicircle of the chase narrowed. The creatures became visible to the boys and the one they were chasing. Rod almost screamed in horror when he saw them closer, but managed to stifle the scream and clamped his mouth with his hands for good measure. Slick human bodies with animal-like bent backs, sides protruding with ribs, unnaturally twisted arms and legs, and open mouths filled with fangs dripping with saliva, a picture not for the faint of heart. Hair hung in clumped, uneven locks over their sweaty faces. Only their eyes were clearly visible. They weren't human eyes. The captain had correctly named this new breed of people wolves, because these yellow, moonlit eyes could only belong to animal predators, not human offspring. The ghastly growling pushed the prey, closing the circle tighter. The bearded man screamed something. He finally reached the road and ran onto the carriageway, frantically waving his arms and trying to attract the driver's attention. Rod rooted for him. He desperately wanted this stranger to be saved. But the cars that still drove the four sides of the roads at midnight only loudly warned the madman with horns, dodging their cars away from him as if he were plague-ridden or insane. The man tried to escape the pursuit on the other side of the road, but Rod could clearly see from above that the chase, initially appearing as a semicircle, was divided into two parts. From the opposite side of the roadway, a second semicircle of hunters was sneaking towards the unfortunate prey. The bearded man noticed this too, and mad with fear, ran around the carriageway, narrowly avoiding being hit by a car. He had to return to the roadside. Now only a few meters of scattered light from a roadside lamp separated him and the hunters. Fear can drive a victim to frenzy and madness to despair. The man grabbed his backpack and began swinging it around him. It was a futile and desperate attempt, but he didn't want to give up without a fight. The wolves on all fours approached, not in a hurry. Their prey couldn't escape anywhere. They were sadistically stretching their pleasure, tormenting the victim with fear. The bearded man continued shouting and swinging his backpack, when one of the hunters, crouching as predators do before a fatal leap, jumped on the unfortunate man. The attack was too sudden and swift. Both fell, and the whole pack immediately pounced on the fallen prey. The man fought desperately, trying to throw off the monsters with his last strength. For a moment, Rod thought the bearded man would succeed, but the circle finally closed, the victim disappearing under a mass of naked bodies, and his soul-rending screams ended with a hoarse, guttural shriek. Rod couldn't count the hunters, but it seemed to him there were no less than 50. They dragged their victim's body away from the roadside light and tore it apart, leaping at each other. The boys could hear the clearly audible crunch of bones and growls, accompanied by shrieks and terrifying screams, arguing over a portion of human flesh. The boy suffocated. He was nauseous, but he didn't move. He was pinned in place, his hands and feet turned to ice, yet he didn't move. Terror gripped him. Primal fear revived in him. He thought he had screamed quietly, but feared this and pressed his face into the old, smelly jacket that served as his bed. Later, he dared to lift his face and look down. One of the wolves prowled between the overpass supports, sniffing the air greedily. Maybe he had heard Rod. The captain lay motionless beside him, not giving away his presence with a single muscle twitch. Rod followed the prowling hunter below. The creature moved slowly from one support to another, sniffing the ground. It approached the support with the steps. The boy held his breath in terror. The wolf lifted his face upwards. His human face was drenched in blood, still steaming in the uneven moonlight. Rod thought the hunter was looking into his eyes and squeezed his eyes shut tightly, fearing the glint in his eyes would give him away. But everything turned out all right. The creature lowered its head and returned to the pack. The boys lay motionless for another half-hour until the hunters, sated, retreated into the darkness. After that, Rod vomited right on the jacket. He cried and couldn't stop, and he couldn't look at the place below where a dark stain had formed on the snow. "This can't be. It shouldn't be," the boy repeated, sobbing when the hysteria began to subside along with the tears. "People shouldn't do this. Hunt and eat people. He was walking. He wanted to get somewhere. And they killed him." "Well, newcomer, you were unlucky. Although, how to look at it?" The captain finally broke the silence, placing a hand on Rod's shoulder and trying to cheer him up. "We were lucky that one didn't notice us when you screamed like a girl. Well, nothing. We'll gather our things in the morning and get out of here. It's not safe anymore, as you can see. They've taken a liking to this place. They'll hunt here for a long time. Yes, it's a shame about that guy, but if not him, they'd have caught someone else. Do you think they filled up with just that bearded man? Did you see how many of them there were? They need at least 5 to eat their fill." "What? You mean he was the first?" "Don't know, buddy. Whether he was the first today on their menu or the last, I don't want to know. Our business is to survive. We've already lost 2. What if they come back?" "I don't think so. They left our shores too quickly. If you want, go to Cowboy and Artist. Sleep with them. I see you won't last till morning. You're still too impressionable, though you know the streets from the inside." "No, I won't sleep. I'd rather sit here. I want to greet the morning here." "As you wish. The first time is always tough. I threw up 3 times when I first saw their hunt," the captain said. "How can this be happening? How?" Rod asked himself, the blond boy, the air, which still smelled of blood and death. "Don't know, buddy. Probably the same way the streets became our home. Some questions don't have answers." They sat in silence, not closing their eyes until the first rays of the sun. The conversation never resumed. Rod blamed himself and considered himself an accomplice in the murder. The captain sat in no less gloomy a mood. Red and Bison joined them. They hadn't seen the gruesome carnage but had heard enough. The boys were in a depressed state, talking about packing up and finding new places to go. "I'm going down," Rod quietly informed the boys, whispering among themselves. "Why?" The captain looked at the newcomer's face with concern. "Wait a bit. Cowboy and Artist will wake up soon and we'll pack up together and go down." "I need to go now. I need to see. I'm going down." Rod already swung his legs over the edge and placed the sole of his right boot on the rung. "I'm going down." "You want to look at the dead guy?" Red sneered. "There are bones left and blood in the snow. Nothing to see." "Not him." The boy's face twisted with disgust at the imagined scene. "The backpack is still there. I want to look at his things, maybe find documents." "And why do you need that, kid? What's the point?" the captain asked. "Why all this?" "Don't know. Just want to see. And my legs are stiff. I'll stretch them." He climbed down from the post faster than he had climbed up the previous day. The snow was gray under his feet. sinking heavily into the ground. It hadn't melted yet. Under the frozen and slightly thawed crust, a fluffy layer remained, but not for long. In the city, in the stuffy and steaming cauldron of fumes and smog, the snow's charm quickly melted, smearing the winter beauty with dirty strokes on the tiled sidewalks and asphalt roads. But outside this hot anthill, the heat lost its hold and allowed the crystal silver, albeit briefly, to live. The sky, tightly covered with low clouds, didn't let the sun through, making everything around look submerged in thick gray twilight. Morning more resembled evening. Rod carefully avoided looking towards the dark stain, deliberately bypassing it in a wide arc. Blood was everywhere. Small crimson crystals clumped together. It seemed the whole surrounding snow was splattered with it. The backpack, fallen with its former owner, lay very close to the road. None of the hunters had touched it or its contents. The boy stood over the backpack, not daring to touch it. Finally, overcoming himself, he bent down and picked up the load by one of the wide straps. The backpack was quite hefty, worn on the sides, and smelled of some familiar cologne. That's how he smelled when he carried the backpack, Rod thought. He opened the main zipper. Inside was clothing rolled into tight bundles, sweaters, socks, t-shirts. There was also a plastic flask wedged in there. Rod opened it. It contained cold tea. On top of the clothes lay a package with sandwiches and cookies. The boy opened the side pocket of the backpack. Inside were various small items like house keys, tissues, a small notebook with a pen, and a passport. This document caught his attention. Alexander Grote, 24 years old. The address indicated was a familiar one to Rod, a town on the outskirts of the country. By a strange coincidence, this town was near the one where Rod was born, the one he had left 2 years ago. Obeying some blind impulse, Rod put the items back into the backpack and, after closing all the zippers, slung the load over his shoulder. He returned to the boys and showed them the find, but didn't allow them to keep the things. "Why not?" Red protested. "He doesn't need them anymore, and there's a sweater and other stuff. We could use them." "I'm going to return them," Rod unexpectedly replied. "Yeah, sure. The dead guy will thank you and put the backpack on his bones," Red jeered, and the others laughed along. "Not to him," the boy said grimly. "Then to whom?" Red challenged. "There's an address in the passport," Rod answered simply. "I'll return it there." "You're going to walk all the way there?" "That's far?" Bison said in surprise. "Yeah. It's not close. I'll also check on my town. It's near where this poor guy lived," the newcomer replied. "Rod, don't be silly," the captain said worriedly. "Why drag yourself to such a backwater because of some backpack? Stay with us. We accept you, right, guys? You survived the night as we agreed." "This guy had a name," Rod persisted. "He must have parents. They should know what happened to him. Imagine, they're probably waiting for him, will be waiting, and he won't come. But they'll still wait and hope. It's cruel. Do you know how many disappear every day?" "Hundreds," the blond boy exclaimed, his face flushing. "No one cares about them. You can't pity everyone. I learned that after ending up on the streets. The street has only one law, everyone for themselves. We care about each other in our group, but others aren't like that. Think it over, Rod. You can even come up with a nickname. Stay. I understand, but I've made up my mind. In this world, you can't survive alone," the captain insisted. "We, like those wolves, live in packs. A loner finds it hard to feed and protect themselves. We are divided into sheep and wolves. That's the law. I've somehow survived alone for 2 years. Rod noted. With each passing year, it will be harder to live alone. That you managed alone for a couple of years. There's a bit of luck and fortune in that. But it won't last long. You need a family. We are what you need. We are the strength that will protect us. Stay, Rod. You know, Captain. Rod looked straight into the leader's eyes. You're right. I was ready to stay. For the first time, I found people like you, unlike anyone else, so united. For the first time, I thought I could become part of a whole. But the problem is, I don't want to go through another night like that. I'm not a sheep wondering if tonight or the next will be my turn to be someone's meal. So you chickened out after what you saw, Shaik cut in. That's nothing. We'll find another place, and we'll be more careful. That's true. But I don't want to sleep during the day and fear moving at night because a bunch of freaks comes out and hunts defenseless people. Yes, you'll find another place, maybe even better and safer. But they will find you there too. They will find you everywhere. If you still don't get it, the city is their hunting ground, and you all are their prey. I'm not used to living in such fear. I want to sleep peacefully at night and wake up in the morning. Even if it's not in Westwick, even if it's a shabby village, there's none of this plague there. Then you've decided? The captain's eyes were sad but still hopeful. And we won't see each other again? Maybe our paths will bring us together again. I want to believe that, Rod replied. I'll return the backpack, visit my town, and then who knows? Maybe I'll feel the pull and come back to Westwick. And I'll find you if you're still here. Do you think we'll still be here? The captain squinted. We'll see, Rod said. But I want to live to the age of that bearded guy. Rod knew his decision was final. He slung the backpack over his shoulder, feeling its weight as a reminder of the man who had once owned it. I wish you luck, Rod, the captain said quietly. Remember, you always have a place with us if you need it. Thank you, Captain, Rod replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. And thank you all. You showed me a side of humanity I thought was lost. Take care of each other. With those final words, Rod turned away from the group and began his journey out of Westwick. The city, with its looming shadows and hidden horrors, receded behind him as he walked. The memory of the pack of hunters, those monstrous reflections of a decaying society, lingered in his mind. He knew that no place was truly safe, that danger could arise anywhere. Rod's steps were heavy, his thoughts racing with the realization that those monsters, those nightmarish hunters, were just an extension of the rot within their society. Yet, he also knew that goodness existed, that it could be found even in the most unexpected places. The captain and his pack were proof of that, a reminder that hope and humanity could endure even in the bleakest of circumstances.